For 2 years, my neighbor made my life miserable over a fence that wasn't even on his property. He harassed me, lied to the city about me, and even damaged my yard. He thought he could bully me into giving up. He had no idea I'd been documenting every single thing he did, and that one survey would cost him everything. Let me start at the beginning, because you need to understand just how petty this man was. When my husband and I bought our house, we were thrilled. It was our first home, a modest place with a decent yard, in a quiet neighborhood. For the first few months, everything was perfect. Then we met our neighbor, a retired man I'll call Frank, who lived to our left. And Frank, it turned out, had a problem with everything. It started with small complaints. Our garbage cans were too close to the curb. Our tree dropped leaves into his yard. Our kids were too loud playing in our own backyard. We tried to be polite. We moved the cans, we raked his side of the leaves, we asked the kids to keep it down. But the more we accommodated him, the more emboldened he got. Some people read kindness as weakness. The real war began over the fence. There was an old wooden fence between our properties that had been there for decades, long before either of us moved in. It was falling apart, and we decided to replace it. We were going to pay for the whole thing ourselves, which most people would be thrilled about. But Frank insisted the fence was in the wrong place. He claimed it was 2 feet onto his property, and that the new fence needed to be moved 2 feet into our yard. Now, we'd seen the property documents when we bought the house. The fence was on the correct line, but Frank was absolutely certain, in the way that some people are certain about things that aren't true. He demanded we move it. We politely declined and said we'd build the new fence exactly where the old one stood. That's when Frank declared war. First, he started calling the city on us constantly. He filed complaints about our supposed code violations, none of which were real. The city would send an inspector, the inspector would find nothing wrong, and a week later Frank would file another complaint. We probably had a dozen inspections that first year, every one of them a waste of everyone's time. The inspectors started apologizing to us because they knew exactly what was happening. Then it got physical. One morning I went outside and found that several of our newly planted bushes along the property line had been ripped out and were lying in our yard, roots exposed. Another time, our side of the fence had been spray painted with the words "wrong line." Once, I caught him on our security camera at night, stepping into our yard to move our property stakes. And here's the thing. Through all of this, I stayed calm, and I documented everything. Every false complaint, I kept the record. Every inspection that found nothing, I saved the report. The ripped-out bushes, I photographed with timestamps. The spray paint, photographed. And we had security cameras covering the property line, which captured Frank trespassing and tampering more times than I can count. My husband wanted to confront him. I said no. I said, let him keep going. Let him build the case against himself. Because I knew something Frank didn't. I knew we were right about the property line, and I knew that the moment we proved it, all of his behavior would flip from being my problem to being his. The turning point came when Frank made a huge mistake. Emboldened by months of us not fighting back, he hired a contractor to tear down the old fence himself, while we were away for a weekend, and began building a new fence 2 feet into our yard. He just decided to take the land he'd been claiming. When we came home and saw it, my husband was furious. But I was, strangely, almost relieved. Because Frank had finally done something undeniable, something that crossed a line no amount of lying could cover. So we did the one thing that ends all property disputes. We hired a licensed surveyor to come out and mark the official, legal property line. The surveyor arrived with his equipment, pulled the official records, and measured everything precisely. And the result was exactly what we knew it would be. The original fence had been in the correct location all along. Frank's new fence was now 2 feet inside our property. He hadn't reclaimed his land. He'd stolen ours, on camera, after 2 years of harassment. I'll never forget the look on Frank's face when the surveyor planted the official markers and explained, clearly, that the legal line was where the old fence had always been. Frank argued, of course. He always argued. But you can't argue with a licensed survey and the official county records. The surveyor just shrugged and said, the records are the records. Then I did what I'd been preparing to do for 2 years. I took everything to a lawyer. The survey proving the line. The dozen false complaints. The inspection reports finding nothing. The photos of the destroyed bushes. The security footage of him trespassing, moving our stakes, and vandalizing our fence. 2 years of one man building a meticulous case against himself. The lawyer was almost gleeful. He sent Frank a formal letter demanding he remove the illegally placed fence at his own expense, restore our property, and pay for the damages he'd caused, with the clear implication that a lawsuit would follow if he refused. Attached was a summary of the evidence. Frank, who had spent 2 years certain he held all the power, suddenly realized he held none of it. Faced with the survey and a folder of documented harassment and property damage, he folded completely. He paid to tear down the fence he'd illegally built. He paid to build a proper one on the correct line. He paid for the bushes he'd destroyed. And, on the advice of his own lawyer no doubt, he never bothered us again. The harassment stopped overnight. The city complaints stopped. The trespassing stopped. The man who had made our lives miserable for 2 years became completely silent the moment the truth was made official and undeniable. Here's what I learned. When someone is bullying you and you know you're in the right, you don't always have to fight them head on. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm, document everything, and let them keep building the case against themselves. Frank thought my patience was weakness. It wasn't. It was a record being kept. So tell me, should I have confronted him sooner, or was letting him dig his own grave the right move? Let me know what you would have done in my shoes.